Good morning, members. We have already formed a quorum, so I will call the meeting to order. Since the last meeting, that is the meeting held on the 15th of November, we have received 3 information papers and they've been listed out in the agenda. As to the date of the next meeting, it will be after the New Year, namely the 3rd of January, a Tuesday. We're going to have a 4-hour meeting since we've got quite a lot on the agenda. There are going to be 5 items. First of all, briefing on the work of the Financial Services Development Council. Second, proposed amendments to the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorist Financing Financial Institutions Ordinance to enhance the regulation of certain designated non-financial businesses and professions. Thirdly, propose as well as amendments to the company's ordinance. And thirdly, Asian Development Bank contribution of Hong Kong. Fifthly, proposed creation of a post in the FSTB, and then charging MPF intermediaries, registration approval and annual fees, and revision of fees in relation to the OCSO. Members, any questions or comments? If not, then I suggest that we've done with this item. As to the next item, please invite the relevant government officials and related parties to join us first.
佢第一季喎，佢咁我啊第3季啦，唔緊要。第2季啦，唔係第3季 ，touch wood 冇第2季。
預計啫。
係，請各位睇翻你自己名牌就咗，唔該晒嚇。
Our guest speakers, please take your seat according to the nameplate.
Good
morning, ladies and gentlemen. For this item, this is about the proposed Members' Bill, Bank of Communications Hong Kong Limited Merger Bill. For those of you who have been with the PAF last term, you would have known that the predecessor of this bill was discussed by us. So I would like to invite Mr. Chen Zhenying to walk us through the paper. He's responsible for the bill. Just a minute, please. I have sort of omitted one thing. First of all, I myself have to declare interest. This is because I have direct and indirect pecuniary interest owing to my capacity as a member of the Clifford Chance. I'm not going to vote on this matter, but do members agree that I can stay and chair this part of the meeting? No objection. Then Mr. Chen, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of the bill is to do the following, that is to provide for the transfer of activities, assets, and liabilities which constitute the retail banking business and private banking business of the Bank of Communications Company Limited, Bank of Communications located in Hong Kong, to Bank of Communications Hong Kong. The Bank of Communications Hong Kong is a subsidiary and is incorporated in Hong Kong, has been granted a bank license. This is going to be similar to previous bank merger bills we have dealt with in the past. Statutory bodies and government departments are scrutinizing the bill. This is going to be a private member's bill, and therefore the president of the council has to rule on the admissibility of the bill, and then we need to secure the consent of the CE before the bill is to be introduced into the Legislative Council. Now, for this bill, the retail banking business and private banking business of Bank of Communications will be transferred to Bank of Communications Hong Kong Limited. This is to enable the following. That is, on a specified day, the retail banking business and private banking business of the Bank of Communications Hong Kong branch will be transferred to Bank of Communications Hong Kong. Bank of Communications Hong Kong is regulated by the Hong Kong MA, and you will be independent. You'll have its own board of directors. Its capital requirements, etc., will be subject to the local banking laws. For the customers transferred to Bank of Communications Hong Kong, they will have the same protection as the protection enjoyed by other clients protected by the relevant local banking laws. Chairman, I don't think that this is going to be a controversial bill. This is going to tie in with the development of banking industry in Hong Kong. This is in line with the policy to regulate banking business in Hong Kong. By having a merger bill to implement the transfer, you will have a high degree of transparency. And then clients who are affected in the retail and the private segments, as well as other stakeholders, they will know that the activities, assets, and liabilities will be clearly transferred to the Bank of Communications Hong Kong. It was a bill that has been introduced into the LegCo during last term, but then it lapsed and had not been enacted. At that time, members were concerned about the assets and liabilities, as well as the transfer of assets and liabilities, the arrangements concerning the entitlements of the employees, customer issues, etc. Explanation has been given to the members. Now we have made some adjustments to the bill, and we are just restarting the process once again. I recommend the bill to our colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Chen. 4 minutes, Mr. Chen Kin-po. Not too many members are going to ask questions. Mr. Chen, please, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Well, last year we had thorough discussion of the bill. There was a Bills Committee. It was simply because towards the end of the previous term, there was filibustering and the bill was held up. All issues have been visited, and therefore I support the enactment of the bill. That is, first of all, the panel gives approval to the bill, and then the bill be discussed later on. Who else would like to ask questions? Maybe the Bank of Communications can also share with us their views. Yes, who would like to speak? Mr. Shaw. Yes, I'm the Chief Executive of the Bank of Communications Community Limited. Please allow me to speak in Putonghua. That's fine. Good morning, members. I'm Shou Fugang, CE, Bank of Communications Limited. I have my legal advisor as well as our financial advisors on either side. I've also got Ms. Nancy Chen, alternate chief executive, as well as Mr. Alan Liu, another alternate chief executive with me. Today we talk about the BOC Hong Kong Limited merger bill. We are glad to have this opportunity. We are glad to come here to listen to your views. Mr. Chen has pointed out that the purpose of the bill is to provide for the transfer of the activities, assets, liabilities which constitute the retail banking business and retail banking business of BOC Hong Kong branch to BOC Hong Kong. It showcases our long-term commitment in Hong Kong. Now, for the retail and private banking business to be transferred to a wholly owned subsidiary of the Bank of Communications, namely BOC Hong Kong, it shows that we are willing to expand our business, and it shows that it is part of our strategy. We would like to deepen and widen our retail banking business and private banking business, and we know that there are growing needs for financial services. BOC, in relation to our clients, our partners, and our employees, we still have our long-term commitment. We want to tie in with the long-term development trends. The bank has noted the trends all over the world. That is, the banks would like to move their retail banking business to their local subsidiaries. Now, on this occasion, retail and private banking businesses will go to a wholly owned subsidiary here. It shows that we are having confidence in the regulatory framework here. And this is in line with the world trend, and we are able to better meet the needs of our clients, the citizens, as well as the employees. Now, for the retail banking business and private banking business, we mainly meet the needs of the local citizens and local companies. We are having a licensed bank, and we are subject to the regulation of the monetary authority. We have the board of directors, we have the senior management, and they form the management of the bank. We will have transparency in our operation. We'll be responsive to the partners, our clients, and our employees. We'll become more local, and we are more responsive to the local needs, and we will have further development on our original sound basis. The business scope will be clear. There will be transparency. We're going to provide professional service to Hong Kong. And then for the transfer of the retail and the private banking business to BOC Hong Kong, well, our clients will benefit. And the original Hong Kong branch will mainly deal with the corporate banking business and other business. Now, for the BOC, in terms of division of labor, etc., there will be greater clarity. And in fact, both BOC Hong Kong branch and BOC Hong Kong will provide more professional service, and they can complement each other. And as Mr. Chen has said, the bill has already, this bill is similar to an earlier bill that has been discussed by the last term legislature. The draft bill has been circulated to government departments and the regulators to protect the interests of the relevant parties. We will try to minimize the impact on the operations. Well, in terms of the daily business, in terms of our clients, our employees, suppliers, trading partners, etc., we have had a large number of agreements in terms of retail banking business and private banking business. Taking the form of a bill, it means that our clients, retail clients and private clients, they will automatically become clients of the BOC Hong Kong. They don't need to sign new agreements. And the agreements are subject to the laws of Hong Kong. Those that have been sold will be regarded as valid. There's no need to have new agreements, and the merger arrangements will be transparent and will be more easily understood by third parties. In the past, over 20 mergers of banks have been enacted through similar legislative arrangements. In terms of employees, all the employees of the BOC Hong Kong branch will remain with us, and then their employment contracts or agreements will be having the same conditions and terms as previously, and their annual leave, their long-term service, etc., will not suffer, and the employer-employee relationship will enjoy continuity. It will not be terminated as a result of the transfer. And in fact, after the transfer, BOC Hong Kong branch and BOC Hong Kong will develop their own business, and they will continue to recruit new staff members. BOC is a state-owned bank set up on the mainland, and we would like to develop banking business in Hong Kong. BOC has been in Hong Kong for 80 years and more, and in fact our retail and private banking business has employed over 900 employees with 40 outlets, and we are providing private and retail banking products to Hong Kong. And the BOC Hong Kong is a licensed bank, and its business address is in Hong Kong, and it will take over the retail and private banking business of BOC Hong Kong branch. So I've sort of briefed you on the contents of the merger bill. If you are having any questions, myself, my colleagues, my legal advisors and financial advisors will be more than happy to consider your views and answer your questions. We are most grateful for having your time for us. For Mr. Shaw's speech, we're going to distribute a copy of the script to members. Questions? Mr. Wu? Yes, in the past, the BOC Hong Kong branch was registered in the mainland. I think last time we were able to ask this question. That is, we want to know whether there is a way to tell us the following. We want to know about the distribution of assets as well as the business conditions of the BOC on the mainland. I want to know whether the assets will remain in Hong Kong. We want to be sure that the client's interests will be best protected.
The second point I would like to make. Well, it's said that this is related to retail banking and private banking business. And that is in relation to the operation of these two areas of business. So for Bank of Communications Hong Kong, have they been involved in anything beyond the retail and private banking business? That is, because of this merger, they have not been included as part of the Hong Kong business. Who is to take this question? Mr. Shao, I'll do it. In relation to your first point, Bank of Communications has been established for over 100 years on mainland China. We have comprehensive portfolio of business. So we have all the conditions in place and experience in place, and we have all the figures and data as well. I'll be able to supply them to you after the meeting. And for the second part, well, for Bank of Communications Hong Kong branch is a fully licensed bank in Hong Kong that is involved in retail and private banking business. Other than that, we have corporate banking business and also in other banking businesses. So in relation to this bill, it's related only to retail banking and private banking business. They will be transferred to Bank of Com Hong Kong. For the others, they will remain with the Hong Kong branch. As I've said before, this arrangement will see the continuation of our commitment to all our clients. Because of globalization, a lot of multinational banking businesses have incorporated their retail and private banking business to their local bank, because this will enhance transparency. This will better serve a client in the retail and private banking business. Well, the other businesses will continue to remain under the branch. This will enhance division of labor. Retail and corporate banking business will complement one another. This is actually a trend in the global arena. So just a follow-up. My understanding is that under this merger bill, well, the banking business will be broken down into two parts. One is the retail and private banking. It will remain with Bank of Communications Hong Kong, whereas the others will continue to be operated by the Hong Kong branch. But it's under the Bank of Communications Group. That is the division of labor. Is that right? Mr. Xiao, please be concise. When it comes to the Hong Kong branch, the businesses, the transfer of business will relate only to retail and private banking business. So the Bank of Communications Hong Kong, they have an independent board and management group under Hong Kong laws. For the other branches of Bank of Communications, well, the other businesses other than retail and private business will remain with the Hong Kong branch. The Hong Kong branch and the headquarters of Bank of Communications is the same legal entity. Mr. Yiu. Thank you. In relation to draft, that is clause 15, I have some questions to make. This is in relation to interests. I wasn't involved in the discussion last term, so I would like to ask some questions. I want to ask about 15(1)(e). That is, does not operate as a breach of covenant or condition against alienation. I want to ask, how do you ensure that after the bill has come into effect, you can ensure that the covenant will not breach the restriction of alienation under the conveyancing law, section 40(3). And in M, well, there's a mention about the stamp duty ordinance. However, in the clause itself, there is no mention about the stamp duty ordinance. So is it consistent or something is missing? Who is to answer? I will ask Ms. Lee to answer the first question. Thank you. In reply to Mr. Yiu's question, I want to make it clear that clause 15 may be related to interests in land the merger bill is in relation to leasing only. The interests in land owned by Bank of Communications will not be transferred under the bill. This is in relation to leasing only. Say, for example, if the Bank of Communications is a tenant of a piece of land. In relation to clause 15(1)(e), it says that the effect of the ordinance the vesting or deemed vesting in Bank of Communications Hong Kong of an interest in land by this ordinance does not operate as a breach of covenant or condition against alienation. So this will not, the leasing itself will not operate as a breach. Well, under the lease that there will be a lease, there will be a tenant, there will be a landlord. There will not be any transfer without consent of both parties. Yes, the name of the capacity, the name of the tenant may be different, but the effect will remain the same. That is in relation to the Hong Kong Conveyancing and Property Ordinance. Ms. Lee, in relation to the stamp duty, well, for stamp duty, my understanding is that if the transfer of the tenancy agreement involves stamp duty payment, Bank of Communications will make the payment. Mr. Yiu, anything else? I think Mr. Yiu, perhaps I will let Mr. Zhang answer first. Thank you. I see that there was abundant discussion in the last term in relation to this bill. I see that There has been some questions asked in relation to the customers and employees. In principle, I support this bill. I think this will enhance the transparency of the banking business. But I have some technical questions to ask. I see a question asked by another member last time. It is in relation to the transfer of the scope of business. There was mentioned last time that the bank has the power to exclude certain types of businesses. So are there any technical difficulties to clarify what's been excluded and what is not? So in relation to this kind of arrangement, are they similar to previous approach adopted under other merger bills? You would like to hear from the Hong Kong MA? Yes. So let's hear from the Hong Kong MA. Is it a common practice? Or perhaps Mr. Shao or Ms. Lee will answer about the assets. Thank you. As well, we understand that we have previously dealt with transfer of business from a branch to a subsidiary. There has been some flexibility to deal with specific situation of a customer to give banks the flexibility not to transfer a contract from a branch to the subsidiary. Well, for the customer, everything will be the same because currently the customer is the customer of a branch. There is an established procedure to ensure that the bank will have to go through certain steps to ensure fairness and to make sure the customer is notified. The customer is one of the branch, so not transferring it to the subsidiary will make no difference. Anything to add, Ms. Lee? Well, this excluded property and liabilities will be very limited. As far as we know at this stage, they will be, well, if the asset is outside Hong Kong and under the local legislations, certain steps will have to be taken to effectively transfer the property or contracts under the outside jurisdiction to Hong Kong branch. So we will first exclude these limited property and liabilities, and we will start the transfer in accordance with the laws of the other jurisdiction. Mr. Chow, Holden Chow. Thank you. Well, as the paper said, that in the last term there has been in-depth discussion. And I want to ask, the merger focuses on retail banking business and private banking business. They will be transferred to Bank of Communications Hong Kong. In the future, say for example, will the Bank of Communications take up more businesses from the Hong Kong branch in the future? Because now it's just retail and private banking business. This is to enhance transparency of regulation. We understand that. So, do you have any intention to transfer more businesses to Bank of Communications Hong Kong? And if there is such an intention, can you tell us about the procedures involved in the future, Mr. Shao? Yes, I will take the question. Well, our arrangement is to transfer retail and private banking business to Bank of Communications Hong Kong, which is incorporated in Hong Kong. And as to whether more will be transferred, we don't have any plans. This arrangement is the most balanced and the best for the development of businesses. Retail and private banking business will be incorporated in the Bank of Communications Hong Kong, which is incorporated in Hong Kong. This will enhance transparency, and it will also be the best for our business. Well, this is a balanced approach, as I've reported. Well, the Hong Kong branch and the headquarters is the same legal entity. So corporate banking mostly involve multinational corporations as customers. So it will be better to remain under the headquarters, which is the same legal entity as the Hong Kong branch, this is the best approach. That's why we only transfer retail and private banking business to Bank of Communications Hong Kong. Mr. Chow, thank you. Assuming that in the future there may be plans to transfer businesses other than retail and private to Bank of Communications Hong Kong, which is incorporated in Hong Kong, will you have to go through LegCo, or you can just deal with it yourself? That's all I want to know. Who is to take the question? Defer to our legal advisor. Please be concise. There is no such intention at this stage, but assuming that if the scale is small, then we don't have to go through LegCo. It's only when it's at a large scale, like the one we see now, that it has to be dealt with through legislation. Dr. Kokaki. Well, it's a transfer of a private bank, then it doesn't really concern us. We have to, however, ensure that under the transfer, customers and employees will be protected. After the Lehman Brothers incident, I believe that the public are very concerned about regulation of banks, especially private banks. These complicated financial products are very often sold in private banks. I don't know whether this will undermine regulation. We don't have any representative from the Hong Kong Association of Banks. However, we have representatives from the Hong Kong MA. I want to ask, after the transfer, will regulation on this part of business be undermined? Well, on the face of it, the transfer will go to a Hong Kong incorporated company. However, it is a subsidiary of a mainland company. And I notice that corporate banking business will remain with the Hong Kong branch. Will this put the regulation of the Bank of Communications on two regulators? Would it make it difficult for regulation by the Hong Kong MA? And if that is the case, how would you deal with it? Let's hear from the Hong Kong MA. Thank you. In relation to the first question, please speak into the microphone. The question is whether there will be any undermining of regulations on retail and private banking business. Well, for banks in Hong Kong, there are locally incorporated banks and also those incorporated overseas, but they are businesses under the regulation of Hong Kong laws. So we use the same standard to regulate these businesses, and we are in close liaison with the Securities and Futures Commission. We don't see any impact on our regulation from the transfer to a subsidiary. That's in answer to your first question. And the second part of the question, well, after the transfer, some of the businesses, including in corporate banking business, will remain with the Hong Kong branch. There has been some examples in the past. There are some overseas banks, including mainland banks or US, UK banks. There has been the same arrangement when part of the retail banking, all of the retail banking business will be operated under a subsidiary. However, for others, mainly corporate business, will remain with the bank at branch.
The reasons being that for corporate loan business, as said by Mr. Shao, are multinational enterprises rely on a Hong Kong branch, then the capital support will be relatively weaker. So for lending banks, there have been cases where they have a subsidiary as well as a branch in Hong Kong. The branch can provide capital, will be backed by its holding bank in terms of capital. And for the subsidiary, we can regulate it more directly. And for the branch, through the regulator, the relevant regulator, and through close cooperation, we can continue to ensure effective regulation. So we don't believe that this change is going to undermine our regulation in any way. A short follow-up. So corporate banking business will be regulated by the mainland regulator when it comes to capital adequacy. Is that right? Are you asking about the subsidiary bank, or I think Hong Kong may can clarify once more. Well, he said he referred to the branch. Regulation of the branch will be done by the mainland regulators, right? Is it true that in terms of regulation on capital adequacy and banking rules, the regulation will be done by mainland regulators? Is that right? I'm concerned about our regulatory role, our and its independence, whether it will be undermined. I think our regulatory position will not be undermined because this is an international practice. If an overseas branch has been set up in a particular jurisdiction, regulation of capital adequacy will be done by the regulator in the registered jurisdiction. Now, this is an international practice, and the relevant regulators have to follow the Basel regulations or standards in regulating the capital adequacy of the bank concerned. Whether it be the branch, the subsidiary, the risk liability will be such that there is sufficient capital to be liable for the risks of its branches and subsidiaries operating overseas. Thank you. If there are further questions, please pass them on in writing. I will refer it to the relevant parties. Next. Hang on. Next.
briefing by the FS on Hong Kong's recent economic situation and near-term outlook. If members have further questions on the previous item, do let me know. A technical issue, will there be a Bills Committee? For sure. Well, further questions can be raised at the BC. Mr. Chen plans to introduce his private members' bill to the Council in the first quarter of 2017. All right. Any comments on this legislative timetable, please? Because, of course, the legislative procedures will be very similar to that of a government bill. There will be a BC, so on and so forth. All right, if there are no further comments, we move on. And that is briefing by the FS on Hong Kong's recent economic situation. Connie, have we provided the relevant information to members? On table, we have the hard copy of the PowerPoint presentation. Please invite the FS and his team to come in. We have Mr. John Zhang, Financial Secretary, Mrs. Helen Chen, Government Economist, and her team. Good morning. You may start when you're ready. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to brief members on the recent economic situation in Hong Kong. Since the second quarter, the global economy has somehow stabilized, and there's been modest growth in the third quarter compared with the beginning of this year, where the situation was rather dire. Things have improved. External demand has stabilized, bringing some support for Asia. For Q3, the overall exports in Hong Kong has noted growth, real growth. There's been improvement in exports to various partners, and also trade has also stabilized in the third quarter. And then there's been increase in IPOs, and our export of services have obviously improved in Q3. The drop has stabilized, and then there's been some growth, and this has reversed the declining trend the past few quarters. In the third quarter, we have external-led growth, and because of a stable labor market, we have increased investment in the private market. The overall labor market is stable, and we're more or less in a full employment situation. The latest economic rate, unemployment rate, remain at 3.4%, and income also has improved. There's been a modest increase in the total increase in employment. However, the overall demand is a bit low. Domestic demand has improved, and some improvement in external demand. So our growth has increased to 1.9% in the third quarter. For the first three quarters, the real growth is 1.4%, more or less in line with my prediction or projection in my budget earlier this year, which was 1 to 2%. Domestic demand is strong, and business environment has improved. We can expect a further modest growth in the fourth quarter. Expect an over 1.5% growth for the whole year. Underlying inflation has continued to drop. On average, it was 2.4% in the first three quarters, and imported inflation is mild, and we continue to control costs. The overall underlying inflation will be 2.3%, and that is a decline for 3 years in a row. Hong Kong is a small economy, and we will continue to be affected by the global economic situation. Our major economies face certain uncertainties. Only the U.S. has a better momentum in revival, and the growth has somehow improved, and this is different from what it was in the beginning of the year. The market is closely monitoring the economic situation in the U.S. after its elections, in particular whether policies of the Trump administration will change substantially. And they're also expecting economic stimulus measures, and they're worried about increase in protectionism. There's been some volatilities after the elections in the U.S., but currencies in many developing markets are under pressure. The U.S. is the largest economy in the world. Should there be major changes there will be major impacts on economic recovery and also the financial markets in Hong Kong and all over the world. The euro area has seen some improvement. They are still facing structural problems, and also influx of refugees have made the situation even more complex. For Brexit, the repercussions have been limited. However, the situation is still developing. People are concerned whether Brexit will have negative impact on globalization of world economy. We are concerned about the impacts of Brexit on the overall euro area. And Italy just had a referendum yesterday on constitutional reforms. The preliminary assessment is that the package would be vetoed, and the PM of Italy has just announced his resignation. So there will be more uncertainties in Europe. And for Japan, the economy is still weak, and there is still continued deflation. It has Japan has delayed its sales tax proposal and has got measures to stimulate its policy. Whether that will have any impact is premature to say. And for Asia's new emerging markets, the fundamentals are still stable and will be the major pillars of economic growth. For the mainland, there's been 6.7 increase in its GPD in the first 3 quarters. It will be able to achieve its target of 6.7%, and continual restructuring may see some volatilities, but there is sufficient room for the mainland economic strength to remain a medium pace of growth. And their U.S. interest hikes are quite likely if the U.S. can continue to improve, and if inflation is normal, and the interest rate normalization is likely to happen. However, the pace and extent of interest hikes will depend on its economy performance and also the new administration. There are still many uncertainties in the situation, and for Euro and Japan central banks, they have negative interest rates, and they're willing to have further easing measures. Geopolitics may cause a reverse in a flow of funds, so we will be vigilant. For locally, stable employment and income will support our retail. Now, if visitors to Hong Kong can continue to rise, this will bring support to our employment market next year. Our construction activities will continue to grow, will provide impetus for overall economic growth. Our economy is still subject to the low world economic growth. We can't be too optimistic for the next year. Now, if our domestic demand remains strong, that will be the main impetus for Hong Kong. And for economic growth, it depends on commodity price, geopolitics, and also the situation of East. Import prices is weak, and the U.S. dollar is strong, and inflation is low, and therefore there is little pressure for further rise in inflation. And for the property sector, because there is still imbalance between supply and demand, and also delayed interest hikes in the U.S., there was a round of market exuberance in Hong Kong the third quarter, and the property market in the residential sector was very active. there was a cumulative 12% growth in property prices between March and October. To address this situation and to ensure stability in our financial market, in early November, we announced a new round of demand-side management measure. We've increased the ad valorem stamp duty of property prices of property transactions to 15%. With these new measures, we have seen a slowdown in the property sector. Transactions have slowed down, and the impact of new measures will have to be observed for a while before we can see its full effect. We will keep a close eye on our property market. When necessary, measures will be introduced to ensure healthy and stable development of our property market. International flow funds can reverse very rapidly. Should there be changes in should this happen, our asset and property prices may change suddenly. I appeal to all potential flat buyers to consider their affordability before making a decision, and to be aware of market risks and the possible risks in the property sector, and to be aware of various uncertainties, in particular possible future rate hikes. There are still hidden risks in the global economy, and that may bring uncertainty to our local economy. We will keep a close eye on the developments. We will ensure stability in our economy and property sector. And I'll defer to the government economists for a briefing. Before I do so, I'd like to say that last Friday, regarding Ms. Lau Xiao Lai, Edward Yu, Nathan Law, and Leung Kwok Hong, judicial proceedings have started asking the court to rule that their oath-taking has been invalid. The view from the DOJ is that pending final decisions, all public officers, including myself, have to follow the announcement made by the CS4A on the 31st of October, and also a letter to the President of the Council on the 8th of November. We are not going to respond to questions raised by these four members. Thank you. Point of order. What point of order? Point of order. Yes? Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, what point of order? Under the basic law, I can read it out to you. Article 73 of the Basic Law. The Legislature of the Hong Kong SAR shall exercise the following powers and functions. We have got 10 under this. There are at least 5 we should exercise. And the FS said that the government has filed an application with the judiciary, and we may be disqualified. Prior to that, we are still here to exercise such powers and functions. Of course, I'm not targeting at the FS. He said that he was following the directions of another Chief Secretary, Mrs. Carrie Lam. Her final remarks before departure, according to Mrs. Lam. So I'm not targeting the FS personally. Of course, before you're going to join the elections, you have to consider your risks. This is like buying a property. I didn't really want to bother the FS. I don't want to slap him on his face. They said that I'm not sure about your qualification, so even if I've answered your questions, that doesn't mean that I acknowledge your status. But now they're saying that they will not answer our questions. What kind of a government is this? This is unacceptable. Either they go to apply for an injunction from the court, an injunction to ban us from being a legislator. We have the rule of law in Hong Kong, not the rule by law. It's also not ruled by a ruler. This is a very serious statement. They used to say that even though I answer a question, that cannot be construed as acknowledgement of your status. Now they go further. They are not going to answer our questions. So Article 73 can be dumped. I must say to our president that they should be banned from so saying. Pending a court ruling, we're still legislators. How come? That as soon as they file a JR, even before leave is obtained, they hold this position. What kind of a government is this? How can they be accountable to the international community? So in a business relationship, if you sue another party, then even before you have an injunction, you can freeze the assets of the other party. Can you freeze the assets of Hong Kong Bank? Of course not. This is a shame. How can you do that? FS, I think you should rather take a cup of tea. Now, I'm not friendly with you. I can't really support such a statement. This is so shameful.
It's outrageous. You're going too far. Yes, 4 or 5 members would like to speak. It is now the turn of Ms. Tanya Chen, Chairman. Chairman, again, it is a point of order. Chairman, I'd like to give you time. I give you the floor. Are you trying to tell us what sort of time limit have we got for questions and answers? Chairman, I want to say that just now, long hair made a speech. FS, have you read your employment contract? Are you going to resign, and when? It's outrageous for you to make such a statement. It's difficult for the FS. If you are on points of order, I'll get all the points of order first before I ask the FS to give a reply. Sorry, speaker is off mic. Well, you're finished. Please be seated. Please take your seat. Chairman, I suggest that let's have a break. Let's have a break and consult legal advice so as to check what the FS has said has a legal basis. It is difficult. Life is really difficult for the FS. That's why last Friday, the SJ had to make it a point to put in the application so as to force you to make this statement this morning, and nobody has spoken anything over the weekend. I suggest that we have a 10-minute break, so let's come back in 10 minutes' time. Thank you.